These enumerated consequences are particularly conspicuously and strongly crystallized in just those contemporary representatives of art who are the manipulators of the contemporary theaters there. And they are particularly strongly crystallized in them because, always performing the roles of being similar to themselves, whose being and significance in the process of their existence are ordinarily far superior to their own, and also, as I've already said, being themselves really almost non-entities, they, with their already wholly automatized reason, gradually acquire false notions about themselves. With such an already quite automatized consciousness, and completely nonsensical feelings, they feel themselves to be immeasurably superior to what they really are. I must confess, dear Hussein, that though during our earlier visits to the surface of that planet of yours, and also at the beginning of this last sojourn there, I went about everywhere and had various relations with those three-brained beings who have taken your fancy, I scarcely ever felt in my common presence a genuine impulse of being pity for the infinitely unhappy fate of these favorites of yours, due to circumstances hardly depending on themselves at all. But when, toward the end of that sixth sojourn there, certain of them were formed with the kind of inner presence which is now possessed by all the representatives of almost all the branches of that art of theirs, and when these newly arisen types, taking part in the process of ordinary being existence on the basis of equal rights with the other three-brained beings there, happened to get into that field of the reception of my sight, with their already exaggerated inner abnormal what is called being self-appreciation, then they served as a shock for the beginning of the arising in me of the impulse of pity, not only for them themselves, but also for all these unfortunate favorites of yours in general. Try now to give your attention, not to all the three-brained beings in general, nor to the other representatives of their contemporary art, but just to those who have become and have acquired the title of artistes or actors, every one of them really being in respect of genuine essence almost what is called a non-entity, that is, something utterly empty but enveloped in a certain visibility. They have gradually acquired such an opinion of themselves, by means of favorite exclamations always and everywhere repeated by them themselves, like genius, talent, gift, and still a number of other words empty also like themselves, that it is as if among similar beings around them only they have divine origin, only they are almost God. Now listen and try to transubstantiate for use at the proper time in the corresponding parts of your common presence my really very practical advice. This practical advice of mine is that if for some reason or other you should have to exist, particularly in the near future, among the three-brained beings of that planet Earth which has taken your fancy, I say in the near future because the presences of these three-brained beings who have taken your fancy and all the already fixed exterior conditions of their ordinary being existence frequently degenerate. And if you should have some work or other there, proper to every conscious three-brained being, which has as its basis the aim of attaining welfare for surrounding beings, and the fulfillment of which depends partly on them themselves, then in whatever community of the contemporary civilization this may proceed, if you should have to meet, in the interests of your work, these contemporary terrestrial types in what are called their circles, you must never fail to be very, very careful, and take every kind of requisite measure to keep on good terms with them. why you must be so careful towards just them, and in order that you may in general better represent to yourself and understand from every aspect these terrestrial contemporarily arisen types, I must without fail mention two further facts which became quite clear there. The first is that, owing as always to the same conditions of ordinary being existence abnormally established there, and also to the existing illusorily inflated, maleficent idea of their famous art, these representatives of art gradually become crowned, as I've already said, with an imaginary halo in the preconceived picturings and notions of other three-brained beings there, and thereby automatically acquire an undeserved authority, in consequence of which all the rest of your favorites always and in everything assume that any opinion they express is authoritative and beyond dispute. And the second fact is that these contemporary types who have recently arisen there acquire, as they are formed, a corresponding inner presence that permits them to become, quite unconsciously on their part, just as easily somebody's slave, as, thanks merely to chance exterior conditions, they can become his worst enemy. That is just why I advise you to be very, very careful not to make enemies among them, so as not to make a lot of trouble for yourself in actualizing of your affairs. Well then, dear Hussein, the very zimus of my advice to you is that if you should indeed have to exist among the beings of that planet Earth, and have dealings with these representatives of contemporary art, then you must first of all know that you must never tell the truth to their face. Let fate spare you this. Any kind of truth makes them extremely indignant, and their animosity towards others almost always begins from such indignation. To such terrestrial types you must always say to their face only such things as may tickle those consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabuffer unfailingly crystallized in them, and which I have already enumerated, namely envy, pride, self-love, vanity, lying, and so on. And the means of tickling which infallibly act on the psyche of these unfortunate favorites of yours are, as I noticed during my stay there, the following. Suppose that the face of one of these representatives of art resembles the face of a crocodile. Then be sure to tell him that he is the image of a bird of paradise. If one of them is as stupid as a cork, say that he has the mind of Pythagoras. If his conduct in some business is obviously super idiotic, tell him that even the great cunning Lucifer could not have thought out anything better. Suppose that on his features you see signs that he has several terrestrial diseases, from which he is progressively rotting day by day. Then, with an expression of astonishment on your face, ask him, "Do please tell me, what is your secret for always looking so fresh, like peaches and cream?" and so on. Only remember one thing: never tell the truth. Although you have to behave in this manner toward all the beings in general of that planet, it is particularly necessary to do so toward the representatives of all the branches of contemporary art. Having said this, Ahun, with the affection of a Moscow suburban matchmaker at the marriage of her clients, or of the proprietress of a Parisian fashion workroom in what is called a high-life cafe, began rearranging the folds of his tail, and Hussein, looking at him with his usual sincerely grateful smile, said, "Very many thanks to you, dear Ahun, both for your advice and, in general, for your elucidations of certain